Chef, 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 chef.
Your attention, please. The show starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Well, hello, everybody. How y'all doing this wonderful afternoon today? Hey, one small moose, how you doing, boo? We're not gonna waste no time, y'all. We are doing some new content around here. Um, Fatal Attraction has a new episode out, and I kind of like these mysteries of how love turns to you know what I'm saying? How love can conquer and divide and ultimately end up in someone's demise. Hey, Pink Karma, how you doing, boo? Um, but before we get started, y'all, let's just say hello. Hey, Nina. Hello. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Um, but yeah, so like this stuff right here is very interesting. So let's jump straight into it. And this is Black History Month, y'all. Okay, so I did find the episode where it does kind of have a little bit of um I don't really know 'cause I really hadn't watched it, but let's just jump straight into it. Let's just jump straight into it. Let's get the banner going up. Please make sure you smash that thumbs up button. Make sure you subscribe if you have not already, and make sure your post notifications are turned on. Let's go ahead and get started. Close captions. We don't put captions up here, y'all. Okay. All right. Here we go.
Riverside, California is a peaceful town full of sunshine and orange groves. And the Mediterranean climate and nearby Joshua Tree National Park make it a picturesque place to live. But not even the California countryside is immune to violence. In 2008, the search for a group of brutal killers would lead investigators from a quiet bedroom community to the last place anyone expected. "50 miles east of Los Angeles, you'll find the city of Riverside. It's the largest in California's metropolitan area, known as the Inland Empire, and the birthplace of the state's citrus industry."
Riverside County is the 10th largest county in the country. It's a huge geographic area.
They had vineyards, and there's a lot of history there. Different places that you can go and explore.
Riverside's most famous landmarks are the Mission Inn and the Fox Theater.
I mean, it had everything that you could ever want. It had the little stores, the little mom and pop shops, and stuff like that.
Originally founded by the Native Americans in the 1700s, Riverside became a colony of the United States in 1870. On October 15th, 2008, that peace was shattered.
Now, most people think that that like things like this, murders, deaths, all that happen in like lower poverty strict areas, but in reality, these things happen all over the place. They can happen in the hood. They can happen in the suburbs, all that. Um, Anyway,
While
what's
most
happening
of
in
the city
suburbs?
gets ready for work, the Riverside County Sheriff's Office is suddenly bombarded with 911 calls. They're all concerning one young couple, Jan and Kiana Piacek.
My wife and I, we got a call early morning. The person asked, where was Kiana? Had you seen Kiana?
I was like, no, she should be at work. And her secretary said, no, she wasn't there. I said, well, let me call Yannick's phone.
And when we couldn't reach Yannick's phone either, I had a really weird feeling in the pit of my stomach.
Jan is a sergeant in the Marines, and Kiana works at an infant care center. Neither one of them is known to miss work.
Both were regarded as very responsible individuals, people who wouldn't miss work without calling in sick or calling in late. It was extraordinarily out of character for each of them, and both Sergeant Piacek's supervisor and Kiana's supervisor both alerted the sheriff's department.
Are they asked to do what's considered a welfare check of the residents to make sure that they were okay?
We don't get a lot of serious calls coming out of that area. So when the preliminary information came in, they gave us an address. That address was within 2 or 3 miles of the courthouse, so it didn't take us long to get there.
Deputies arrived to find the Piacek's front door left open. As soon as they step inside, they're struck by the smell of gasoline. But that's not all.
As you walk down the entryway area, it opens up into kind of a great room with a large kitchen off to the right, and then the living room area off to the left with the couches. And lying by the couches were Yannick and Kiana Piacek. They've been executed.
Gasoline. So it sounds like somebody was trying to cover this up with gas, maybe start a fire. Who knows? But for some reason, didn't start the fire and ran out. That's why it's always good to keep the same, not necessarily routine, but when you don't show for something, people will start looking for you. But if you're the type of person who always doesn't show up or never follows through, people aren't going to look for you. You know what I mean? So it's good to keep that same thing about yourself. Keep that same knack about you, where people know if you're not here at this time, something's wrong.
Both of them had red duct tape wrapped around their eyes. Both had their ankles and wrists taped together. There was apparent blood coming from their head. It was obvious when you walked up to the body where they had been shot.
They were killed almost execution style. Both of them were shot in the back of their heads multiple times. As an investigator, when you're coming onto a crime scene, you literally have laser focus. You're paying attention to anything and everything. Everything is important. Nothing is too small when it comes down to evidence.
Sometimes you work an investigation, you may not get all the details of the crime. But in this situation, we know exactly what happened. This is a cold-blooded murder.
In 2005, he was deployed to Iraq. But shortly before he left, Jan met the young woman who'd become his wife.
Kiana was at San Diego, and her best friend gave a party for some Marines that were going to Iraq. And Kiana, typical Kiana, she was in the back room studying.
Kiana was best friends with our friend's girlfriend. Yannick, made up his mind that he wanted to date her and get to know her better. I don't think she wanted to date Marines, but he was persistent and I think kind of got her number and got to talk to her.
But Jan would have to wait until his tour of duty was over to pick up where he'd left off.
They gave the guys a welcome home party, and finally she gave him the time of day.
Jan had a lot of personality, a lot of great sense of humor, tried to make everything fun and enjoyable, really liked to enjoy life, but was also a really hard worker. Once she saw who he really was as a person, I think that she fell in love with him equally as he fell in love with her.
She brought him home and she said, I think this is the one. She says, I said, are you sure? She says, yeah, Daddy. She said, I think he's the one I'm going to marry. I said, okay, well, if he's good enough for you, then, he's good enough for me.
In the summer of 2008, the couple got married.
She planned everything. She picked the colors. Her and Yannick did everything on their own. That's what made it special.
And this was in a wine vineyard on a beautiful, perfect San Diego day with Marines and dress blues and his beautiful wife and all her bridesmaids.
I can remember all the bridesmaids wearing Converse. That's what Kiana wanted. She had white Converse on, and it was just awesome to be there.
Now, this young lady had a different take on her wedding. Most of the girls want the high heels with the stilettos. She wanted Converse. I like that. I like different people who do different things like that, who are not just the normal.
And to witness the wedding and to witness the union. And
cute couple, though.
Everybody just seemed to be so happy.
After the wedding, Jan and Kiana moved into their first home in Winchester, a mostly working-class community just south of Riverside.
2 stories, backyard, remodeled kitchen. Not a lot of enlisted Marines, get into a house that beautiful.
Perfect neighborhood, more or less, for a newlywed couple to begin, their new lives together.
But the newlyweds would never even get the chance to finish unpacking.
We were just celebrating their wedding, and now they're dead.
Wow. So they had even been married for a couple of days, and now they're deceased in their newly purchased house. Who could have wanted these people dead like this?
I couldn't process
that's
it. Who would harm
that's
them?
sad.
Why?
"30 miles south of Riverside, California, is the quiet suburb of Winchester.
The area where Jan and Piacek had bought a home was actually in Riverside County, in an area considered Winchester or French Valley.
It was just to the north of the city of Temecula, which is a highly populated residential and commercial city.
Winchester was a mostly rural area until a construction boom during the early 2000s. The affordable housing was attractive to military families stationed at nearby Camp Pendleton. Among them were Jan and Kiana Piacek.
Kiana worked in Paris, and Yana was at Camp Pendleton. So that area was in between both of their jobs.
They knew what they wanted right away, and that was to be married, that was to buy their home, and that was to build a family together.
But now, the couple have become the victims of a horrific double homicide, and investigators are determined to find out why.
Right away, you could see that there's shoe impressions on the tile floor. You can smell gasoline in the house.
Our first impression walking in was whatever happened there, they were trying to destroy evidence by trying to catch the house on fire.
It appeared that they tried using several methods, one being turning the gas to the oven on and leaving it on. Several small areas within the house that had been lit on fire, it didn't end up causing a large fire.
At first glance, the evidence seems to point toward a robbery gone wrong.
But the home had been searched. They'd also emptied the contents of purses and opened wallets.
However, the way Jan and Kiana were killed tells detectives there is much more to the story.
Kiana and Jan Piacek were shot 2 times in the head each. In my 18, 20 years of investigating, it's one of the more brutal crime scenes that I've ever seen.
Sergeant Piacek had been beaten in the living room. Kiana had been taken away to other areas of the residence that she had been stripped.
There was evidence at the scene that indicated that Kiana was sexually assaulted.
This is not something that happened in an instant.
So it's not bad enough to take someone's life, but not only do you take their life, but you sexually assault them. Gosh, this had to be somebody who knew the two, um, jealousy, um, maybe even a neighbor, because the fact that this happened in a suburb area where the neighbors, you know, I like nosy ass neighbors, okay? Get in my business, be out of my business. When some shit go wrong, you gonna know, and you gonna let me know, okay?
There was a prolonged period of physical, mental, emotional, and sexual torture that took place.
One person's not going to do that. So from
Hey,
the
Life
beginning, we
Lindsay.
knew that it was going to be more than at least one person involved.
With this particular killing, because of the level of the brutality that was involved, it was a key indicator to the police that this was a personal attack.
As you continue through the house, there's spray painting where somebody wrote the N-word lover in silver spray paint on the wall.
Boom, that's it. It was racially motivated. Probably the fact that they were both, um, one was white, one was black. That could really, that's crazy. People still do that to this day. Oh Lord.
It was in big letters on the mirror, and it was big letters on the wall. It was obvious that whoever wrote it there wanted us to see that.
To investigators, this suddenly looks more like a hate crime.
It's possible at that point that we could be looking at a racial issue. Maybe there's people that have a problem with the fact that a white man is married to a black female.
The very first thing we got to do is talk to their family members.
They asked, you know, did they have enemies? Did they have anybody that, you know, that were mad at them? And you know, I couldn't, you know, point the finger at anybody.
There was not one name on a list. We could tell them a grudge, an old boyfriend, a girlfriend, nobody.
But Kiana's mother does remember one thing that catches investigators' attention.
I talked to her the night before. I could do every night. And she called to say goodnight. And I could hear her, you know, on speakerphone. She's walking around, putting the alarm on the house. So it's like, how'd they get in the house? How'd they get in without the alarm going off?
There was no damage to the front door or the lock, anything suggesting any type of forced entry. It was apparent that whoever entered the residence had gained access by being let into the residence.
Yeah, so this is somebody that either she knew or he knew. Now, the fact that you have racist friends, I'm going to think it was one of his people that he may have known that maybe deep down didn't like for him to be in a marriage or relationship with this young lady. That's my opinion on this.
Was it possible Yad and Kiana knew their killers?
Hell yeah.
The alarm had been turned off. So it would indicate to us that at least the victims had some familiarity with who came to the door.
We had so many questions. Who would hate somebody so much? Did you break in their house in the middle of the night and murder them?
Multiple footprints throughout the house. That was an indicator that they were looking for more than one suspect.
There were 3 distinct shoe tread patterns that our forensic tech used latent print powder, the way they would recover fingerprints. We took those shoe tread patterns, went to a shoe store in the mall. The employee there described one as being consistent with a Nike Air Force One, another pattern being consistent with the Nike LeBron 4, and the other Nike Cortez.
We knew that if we found somebody and we were looking at the soles of their shoes, we would have a pretty good idea if they had been there or not.
But first, they would need suspects to compare the prints to. And so far, the police don't have any leads.
The The first couple of days in any investigation are crucial, but if you don't have any suspects, it can almost lead into you running into a brick wall.
It was frustrating. It was
I'm not sure if he was a Marine or just in the Army, what station, what area of the military he was in, but he was in the military, and yes, his newly wed wife, they had been married for maybe like a day or two.
It was like every day after the initial incident, the case gets colder and you seem further away from solving it.
There was no focus on a person of interest or even a group of interest at that point.
Even the evidence that's
these types of words to throw law enforcement off if you're going to actually burn the entire house down to destroy all evidence.
It could be that these things were written on the wall simply to misdirect investigators and to lead them to believe that it was race related when it wasn't.
We were pretty sure fairly quickly that was just a red herring to throw us off. Based off of that, my partner and I were pretty confident in saying that this wasn't a racially motivated crime.
It's beginning to look like investigators may never find the killers. But then they finally get the break they've been looking for.
The real first lead that we got was when Riverside Sheriff's Department was able to find out that Kiana's ATM card was used right outside the back gate at Camp Pendleton.
After the murders occur, her bank card is used at a Washington Mutual bank branch in Fallbrook, California.
Right. So it was somebody. So one or two things had to happen now. So either they made them give up their PIN numbers, or it was somebody who already had access to get their PIN numbers. But I think it was somebody who forcefully made them give up their PIN numbers in hopes to think they would just leave and not murder the two.
That $400 is taken out of her account. Through that, we're also able to find that those ATM machines have cameras on them.
Detectives reviewed the camera footage, but unfortunately, the suspects had been careful to cover their tracks.
For the people who used the ATM card at that location were sophisticated enough to cover their faces completely with bandanas.
Blue bandanas were used to mask that subject's face, and the subject was wearing Mechanics brand black gloves with the white letters on it. So you could see those two things that stood out to us.
Police may not be able to identify the killers yet, but at least now they know where they went.
It was significant because of the proximity to Camp Pendleton. Our victim, Jan, worked at Camp Pendleton. There were some theories of the possibility that the suspects responsible for this were also in the military.
There's really no reason anybody would join the Fallbrook directly after a murder unless they lived in Fallbrook. We're heading to Camp Pendleton. The fact that it was so close to the back gate indicated to us that they were most likely going to Camp Pendleton.
Could Jan and Kiana's killers actually be fellow Marines?
We could kind of see things clicking. All arrows really pointed to Camp Pendleton.
If they were fellow Marines and co-workers, that would explain why they opened up the door at that time of night, and maybe why the neighbors hadn't noticed anything strange going on. But the fact that your own comrades could come into your own house and slay you and your wife in the middle of the night and then sexually assault your wife is just crazy.
A week into the investigation, Riverside County detectives believe the suspects in the brutal murders of Sergeant Jan Piacek and his wife Kiana might be fellow Marines.
It was probably challenging for the investigators to have to suspect that Marines may possibly be involved with this case. I mean, most people look at the military as our heroes.
Camp Pendleton is a Marine Corps base located 40 miles south of Winchester. It is the largest military facility in California, giving investigators more than 100,000 potential suspects to consider.
Camp Pendleton truly is its own city. You have housing there where you have active duty military members that live there with their families. There are schools there. There's a grocery store called a commissary.
Once the information started coming out that there was potentially an angle that involved military service members, then obviously the Sheriff's Department had to reach out to NCIS for their cooperation in gaining access to base.
Military base is a different jurisdiction, so the police would have to work with the military in regards to conducting any kind of investigation.
After securing permission from Camp Pendleton's commanders, investigators start interviewing the Marines serving in Jan's unit.
One of the things that we wanted to try and do is establish who had daily contact with Jan Piacek. In particular, who worked for him, who worked around him, who were his friends, and to determine if anybody had any kind of animus against Sergeant Piacek.
The initial people that we talked to were like, we have no idea why this would happen. He was a hardworking Marine.
But detectives soon discover that Sergeant Piacek wasn't popular with all his troops.
Some guys thought he was like riding them, and I guess they didn't like him.
He was restationed in Camp Pendleton at a training squadron. So this is a different environment than a mission-ready Marine Corps squadron. This is a training group. He went there to try to implement better Marine Corps culture with this group of Marines. And obviously they didn't appreciate it.
And there was one Marine in particular who took issue with Jan's leadership style.
We had another Marine come forward and tell us about a problem that had arisen with another Marine named Tyrone Miller. When we met with this Marine off base, he told us about receiving the information about Tyrone Miller hating Sergeant P. That Sergeant P had made comments to Tyrone Miller that he was going to have a bad performance evaluation.
It comes out that he was planning on blocking Miller's promotion. So this may have been a good motive.
That's a good motive right there, okay? Listen, play with somebody's money, and that's a recipe for disaster. Like, I don't know, what went on behind it, but that is a really good reason why somebody would want to take out somebody. But that would not explain why take out the wife as well. Why not find a way to just get rid of the person that you have a problem with? Why take down a whole family?
So why this murder happened?
Tyrone Miller actually had made a statement after the murders were discovered that, I feel bad that Keon is dead, but I don't care that Sergeant P is dead.
But was Tyrone Miller actually angry enough to kill his commanding officer?
Having discovered that Lance Corporal Miller had some animus against Sergeant Piacek, we decided to bring him to Camp Pendleton, to the NCIS headquarters.
Investigator Wortman and I told him we were following up on the investigation of Sergeant P's murder and explained to him that this was a voluntary interview, that if he wanted to leave, he could. He said, no, this is no problem. I liked Sergeant P.
As we spoke to him, we started asking questions that I would call alibi statements that you would ask almost anybody. Where were you during this time? Were you in this particular area?
We asked him basically in the manner of, we don't have your cell phone records now, but if we obtained them, would there be any reason your phone records would show you in the area of the victims the night of the murder? And he said they shouldn't. That stood out to us because it's not a strong denial.
Their suspicions are raised even further when Tyrone describes what he was wearing on the night of the murder.
He very simply could have just said, I wear casual clothes, but he instead decided to say, well, he wears his Air Force Ones.
He's wearing shoes that leave the same tread.
Now, y'all remember the shoes. the print they found. Okay, that print was some Air Force Ones. There was several different ones, but that was one of the prints. The fact that he's wearing Air Force Ones on the day this happened, and the fact that they found Air Force One prints leads me to believe, as well a few others, okay, this man had to have been there. And I bet you he did not know they got his footprints. See, some people talk too much. When people will talk their own selves into a confession and not know it.
Pattern as those that were found at the crime scene.
When we both left that interview, I think we both believed that he was somehow involved.
Mm-hmm.
Because Jan and Kiana's murder involved Marines, the NCIS played a big role in the investigation.
Homicide investigations can be difficult, and it's more complicated when there's more hurdles that you have to jump through. You have to conduct an investigation differently when it involves any division of armed forces. Suddenly, there's certain procedures that have to be followed. I wouldn't have any jurisdiction.
We all agreed that what Mr. Miller said was suspicious. We thought there was enough to get over the probable cause hurdle to get a search warrant to look into him further.
On October 29, 2008, investigators from Riverside County and the NCIS coordinate to search Miller's home on the base.
At that time, we used a ram to open the door, announcing that the police get down. As we turned the corner into the hallway, we noticed that Lance Corporal Miller had picked up his toddler and was using his toddler as a shield, backing up towards the back bedroom. In all my time as a special agent, I've never ever heard or seen a suspect pick up his child and use it as a shield. This was despicable. Thankfully, Lance Corporal Miller got down and we made the arrest.
While NCIS agents detain Miller, investigators begin collecting evidence.
Inside that house, the investigators found Sergeant Paycheck's home address scribbled on a piece of paper that was concealed inside a couch. A cache of firearms, some of which were stolen.
Kiana's ATM card.
Yeah, this happened in a suburb area of San Diego, I believe.
Was right out in the open. I think it was on top of a dresser drawer. Jewelry belonging to both of them were there.
There was also a backpack. Inside of the backpack were the mechanics brand gloves that were visible on the ATM surveillance video, as well as blue bandanas. It was pointed out to me that there were expended casings that appeared to have blood on them. What they found, I think, cannot be described to anything other than a treasure trove of evidence.
Faced with that evidence, Tyrone,
he did it, or he was involved in it in some type of way, y'all. The fact that they found the bandanas. So you remember they found somebody who went to the ATM, who drew out $400 from the ATM, and they had on bandanas. That is probably one of the bandanas that was used for the person at the ATM machine. And who keeps the shell casings? Right, I'm with y'all. Who keeps all this evidence laying around? Why not destroy it, burn it, set it on fire, just some kind of way? Who keeps all this evidence?
Miller finally admits that he and some other Marines were at the Piatek's home on the night of the murders, but insists he didn't kill anyone.
He describes going to the house. He admits to hitting Sergeant P. He admits to that they taped them up.
They overtook him, pointed guns at him.
Lance Corporal Miller really portrayed himself as just a person on the fringe of this crime. He was simply somebody that was standing by.
He was just going there to to beat up Sergeant P because he was angry at him because of the bad performance evaluations. You know, there was these other people that did the sexual assault.
Miller claims his plan was already spiraling out of control. But then one of the other Marines decided to get rid of the sergeant for good.
He identifies that the shooter was a person by the name of Emery's John.
Emery's John was also a fellow Marine who had started out in Sergeant Paycheck's unit.
He said Emery's John said that Sergeant P was going to recognize their voices and that they had to kill him. And that Emery's John walked over to both of them and shot both victims in the head.
Based on Miller's statement, investigators immediately bring John in for questioning.
During that initial interview, Emery's John steadfastly denies that he had anything to do with murders. Emery's John couldn't comprehend how anybody could do this to someone like that.
But the evidence found in his barracks tell a different story.
This is barracks room. We find his cell phone, and in his phone is the nickname Psycho, NCIS.
Now, I don't think for 1 second that these people went over there to just rough him up. No, because you know, if you went over to your sergeant's house to rough him up, what kind of consequences were you going to have back on base? Okay. So I think they did go over to his house with the intent to harm him and his wife, or harm him. And of course, his wife was there as a witness, so they had to handle her as well.
Ran that phone number through their system, and we were able to identify Keyshawn Sykes.
A search of Sykes' apartment uncovers more of Kiana's stolen jewelry. Investigators also discover proof that this wasn't the first time this group of Marines committed a crime together.
As we're going through property that's being recovered from all the places that we're doing search warrants, we're able to link that to robberies that have been occurring other places.
We found IDs, jewelry that did not belong to Jan or Kiana, an inordinate amount of jewelry, lots of weapons, others bonds in other people's names.
We happen to have found a crew that were doing other burglaries and robberies.
We were able to put together a picture of how this group was terrorizing people that lived anywhere near Camp Pendleton and had been getting away with it for a long time.
Now, the military is supposed to serve and protect, and we got these knuckleheads out here robbing people, taking their hard earnings and what they've worked for over time, and just wait, Shabu, lock them
They were
all up.
getting desensitized to what they were doing. John and Kiana were unfortunate enough to be one of the later home invasions they did, and they obviously pushed it all the way on this one.
On November 3rd, 2008, the Riverside County Sheriff's Department arrests all 4 Marines.
Tyron Miller, Emery's John, Kevin Cox, and Keyshawn Sykes, all 4 of them were charged with capital murder.
They wore the uniform, but they weren't Marines. They were armed robbers, and that's all they'll ever be in my mind.
On August 12, 2009, a Riverside County judge orders the 4 defendants to be tried for murder.
Tyron Miller, Emery's John, Kevin Cox, and Keyshawn Sykes all entered not guilty pleas. That places a burden on the prosecution team to prove the charges that we've alleged against them.
But before their trials can even begin, Keyshawn Sykes threatens to derail the proceedings.
There was a time in Keyshawn Sykes' pretrial litigation where he stood up and started talking incoherently and taking what appeared to be urine. And
he trying to play the crazy card. He trying to play, oh, I am mentally unstable to withstand trial. Therefore, i.e., he goes to a mental hospital, does less time, less of a sentence, and pretty much gets off with murder. Wow. Don't try to play crazy now, sir. You wasn't crazy when you walked in that man's house and robbed him and sexually assaulted his wife. Oh, doesn't
and spreading it across the courtroom. That forced the defense team to have him evaluated.
The court has to decide whether that person is considered competent or not.
The jury ended up finding that there was not enough evidence to believe that he was incompetent. Criminal proceedings were reinstated.
The court decides to hold separate trials, one for John, Miller, and Cox, and one for Sykes. On April 8, 2013, the first trial gets underway at the Riverside Hall of Justice.
They bring them out in orange jumpsuit. It's a crazy experience to now be in the same room and this close to all these guys.
You sit there in the courtroom and watch them smile and laugh and make jokes. It was funny to them. It wasn't funny to us.
In his statement to police, Tyrone Miller claimed Emrys John was responsible for the murders. But in their opening statement, prosecutors revealed they have a very different story from the other Marines.
All the perpetrators indicated that it was Lance Corporal Miller who was in charge. It was Lance Corporal Miller who planned this terrible event. And it was under Lance Corporal Miller's direction that they did this deed.
So the suspect said that John was the one who shot him, but they also said that it was Miller who gave the order. When the first bullet didn't kill Kiana, Miller ordered them to shoot her again.
If it wasn't for him, they'd still be alive.
Corporal Miller's quest for vengeance against Sergeant Piatek, it is truly tragic.
They knew exactly what they do. To sit here and say it wasn't our intention, it was an accident or whatever, no. That's not going to fly.
Kevin Cox also tries to minimize his involvement.
Kevin Cox's defense team focused their arguments on the fact that Kevin Cox said he was a lookout and that he was not in the house at the time of all the worst things that happened.
You know what? At the end of the day, it don't matter whether you in the house, outside the house, around the corner from the house, in the car at the house. It don't matter where you are, okay? You played a role in these people's death. Therefore, you have the same amount of involvement as everyone else, regardless of what you're sitting and trying to say now, because when it all happened, you didn't pick up that phone and say, hey, these people over here just to kill these people, blah, blah, blah. You didn't try to call anybody and tell anybody. So therefore, you're just as guilty. Just as guilty. Sorry.
One of the attorneys said, well, while you were standing outside, how come you didn't call the police? How come you didn't try to stop it?
It doesn't matter that Emrys John was the one that pulled the trigger. All four of those people sealed Kiana and Yannick's fate that night when they went to that door. They didn't try to talk anybody out of going to that house. They did everything to further the crime and nothing to prevent it.
They were trained, and they used that training to kill my children.
The juries deliberate for several days before rendering their decisions.
Ultimately, the trial led to guilty verdicts for all four.
Tyrone Miller was also convicted of sexual assault.
The jury evaluating Tyrone Miller's punishment and Emrys John's punishment decided that they were both deserving of the ultimate punishment, the sentence of death. Kevin Cox's jury ended up deciding that life without parole was a more fitting punishment.
A year later, Keyshawn Sykes stands trial. He is also found guilty and sentenced to death.
That's when I felt closure.
Savannah, Georgia is...
Wow, y'all. That is crazy. So the next one is another episode of it. So what do y'all think about this? like this is crazy. Like the fact that your own colleagues and coworkers set you up to be murdered and you trusted. Why would you? But you see, well, they had their faces. They couldn't see the faces. No, so that doesn't make sense. Okay, something else had to happen in order for them to open up the door. Because if I'm seeing you and I know at work I'm on your ass 24/7, okay, and I'm riding you about uh how you want me getting this promotion, right? If you show up at my door at 12 o'clock at night, I'm not gonna open it. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna open my door. Because why is you at my door so far at night? Now, if they were all dressed up where you couldn't see their faces, okay, still at 12 o'clock at night, best believe I am not going to open up the door. And that's on period. I don't care what you want to go tell whoever. Uh-oh. Are y'all main person here fix stuff? Anyway, I gotta go, y'all. Always remember, stay blessed, stay positive, stay motivated, and I'll see you guys in the live stream.
Go call the police.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Hold on.